So as you guys may know, I was just in Florida this past week for my spring break with my girlfriend, right?
Big Florida man.
And we were going to like Fort Lauderdale. And one of the first days that we were in Fort Lauderdale, we're getting a little hungry, as you do. So me and my girlfriend were looking for places to eat. And one of the places that my girlfriend found was this place called Hamburger Mary's, right?
Okay.
And the special
Sounds like a good American shop.
Yeah, exactly. Because she wanted like a burger and shit.
Yeah.
So we pull up, we look at it, and like it's actually a really cool fucking place. It's all themed around like drag queens.
Oh, shit.
Which I was so surprised for like Florida.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But you know, places are diverse, whatever. But it's themed around drag queens. Honestly, such fucking good food.
Nice.
Such fucking good food. We pull up there. They're doing a special, right? Basic wines and like beer. Buy one, get one free.
Liberal burger, half off.
Liberal burger, half off, right? And they said chicken sandwiches, $5 each.
LGBTQ milkshake, $3.
Gay milkshake,
Yeah.
$2.
He, him, pronoun,
he, they,
sandwich.
Yeah, he, they chicken sandwich, $5. So like shit like that, right? Good food we get, but we pull up to this place, right?
Non-binary Bavarian pretzel.
Yeah, and there's these like business-looking dudes there. And I'm already like, that just seems like a little out of place, too. Because we had like a femboy waiter and everything. And there's these dudes in suits just sitting there. And they go, oh, are you here for the event? And I'm like, no. I'm in like my Cowboy Bebop shirt and shit. Absolutely not. I'm just here for food.
I'm hungry.
And so we're sitting down. We order. We start eating food. And it's really good. And the place is sick. The ambiance is amazing, right?
Okay.
And then the guys in suits, a bunch of other people in suits like show up. And I guess there's like this business event going on there. And so they start the event. And it turns out it's an event for people who invest in real estate. So it's a landlord event at the drag queen bar, which was already like funny. Like, this is so neoliberal. But then they actually start talking about what the event is centered on. And the event was centered on this this bill. You remember, it was like, I want to say this might have been one of the first episodes we recorded when the Miami-Dade apartment building collapsed.
Yes, I remember
Yes,
that. Yeah.
at Surfside. So it was about that. But more accurately, it was about a law that was passed after the apartment collapse. Because remember, the apartment collapsed because of crumbling infrastructure.
Yeah,
people
little regulation.
were not keeping out with maintenance. So what this law says is that you need to go through, I think it's yearly inspections to make sure that, you know, apartments are safe to live in. And then you also need to make sure that your reserves for repairs are 100% funded.
Okay.
Seems dope, right?
Yeah.
Seems like, oh, this is there to prevent tragedy.
For sure.
Not to her and all the fucking landlords at this event.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I'm just enjoying my chicken sandwich, listening to the shit. And she starts talking, and it's piquing my interest. I'm like, wait a minute, what the fuck is going on? Like, what do you mean? And she immediately starts talking about just how bad this is. How bad this is for real estate and for real estate investors.
You know, I actually need to be able to kill more people.
Exactly. No,
more people
literally
have to be caught under the rubble of my real estate buildings.
It's fucking insane. And she goes on to talk about how my favorite part is she said, so inspectors at the city and county level are going to be the ones that are doing your inspections and deeming whether or not buildings are like safe, whether or not the foundation is safe enough for you to need to repair it or not. She said that's government overreach. You know how these things go. This is big government stepping on us, the people who own apartment complexes.
Yeah, the little guy landlord.
This is big government stepping on small apartment complex owner.
Yeah, the little guy landlord that owns like 6 apartment complexes in Miami. Like,
no, literally just this little guy who maybe is worth hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Just sitting there. And then she went on to complain about how tenants will be able to access the reports, the structural integrity reports.
Great.
And she said that was bad.
They need they should not know if the floor's about to fall out underneath them.
No, literally, because she basically fucking said that. She went on to say something like, if tenants see this and they see that the building's unsafe to live in, why would they pay rent? Like,
exactly.
Yeah. Why would they pay rent? And she's like, then they're going to leave and you're out that money. Then you're it's like real estate investors want real estate to, like, investments are fundamentally risks. Like, that's how there should be. That's how they're proposed in your Econ 101 classes. But real estate investors do everything to just obfuscate that. They do everything in their power to make this investment just not risky at all, even when it's at the cost of literal human life.
Like, okay, the free market in the capitalist sense is premised on, right, there's the owner, the business owner, or, the product producer, the seller that is selling a product. And the consumer, in a capitalist sense, for the capitalist economy to work ideally, they have to be able to make educated, knowledgeable decisions about where they put their money, and then the responsibility is put on them for the market to function, right? Consumers are supposed to be smart, educated in what they're buying, and if they buy a poor product, that's their fault because they didn't know about it.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's literally you have no chance to know about it.
Yeah, no, it's
you
actually bad that you could possibly know that your building could collapse while you're sleeping at night.
Suddenly your neighbor's just, in your living room because they fell through the fucking ceiling. Like, come on now.
It's so fucking good. But then she starts talking about like opportunities to invest, right? And she's like, okay. Basically, her proposition is that other realtors, like people who own these buildings, are going to attempt to sell the buildings in order to offload costs onto ignorant investors who aren't paying attention to like the new Surfside law. And this is a law that's all throughout Florida, right? Okay. And so that's the premise, is that investors are going to offload these things, kicking tenants out, but we're just going to ignore that part. We're just going to ignore that people are going to have nowhere to live because they just don't want to fund these reserves. Because a big question she had was, how are we going to get the money to fund these reserves? Your exuberant profits. All of the fucking money you make for sitting on your ass and doing nothing is what you're going to do to fund these reserves.
From the rent people pay.
You're going to maybe take a loss on the year so that you can have a building that's safe to live in.
Not even a loss, it's just a slight reduction in the money you're going to make, which is already surplus.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. Like the whole landlords sit there and just make free profit. Most landlords, especially landlords like these fucking bitches, they are just sitting there and they're hiring apartment managers to actually like manage the property.
Right.
All they did was front the capital to buy the apartment and front the capital to pay the people who are running the apartment.
Yeah.
They're completely hands off in this process. And they sit back and just make the money.
That's an important distinction because what apartment managers or complex managers do sometimes is like actual labor. You know what I mean? Like figuring out how to get certain things fixed, how to get certain things upgraded, et cetera. That can be actual labor. But the process of just owning something isn't labor.
Oh, literally.
That's where like the landlords are leeches thing comes in.
That's what capital is too.
Yeah.
Like that's what private property is. That's why there's a distinction between private property and personal property.
Yeah.
Just private property just sits there and generates capital for you. And it was just so interesting because it's like her whole assessment here isn't wrong under the context of capitalism, and that's why it's morally wrong, right? Like the investor, their job is to just make as much money as they can to offload risk. Like they are incentivized to do these things. It is bad. It is bad for the landlord when their tenants can know whether or not their apartment is safe to live in. And that's what's so fucked up about the system that we live in.
Yeah.
Because all of these incentives are there just to fuck over the tenants. Because not once during this talk was focus put on the tenants and their right to live and have shelter.
Yeah, the actual people that need to survive.
Exactly. The focus was all on how can you make money and how can you kick these people out when you need to save your investment.
There's also, I mean, you can even just further extrapolate this system to like CEOs and corporations in any industry, right?
Yeah.
They have a financial responsibility, a legal responsibility to maximize profits for their shareholders.
Exactly.
So that just encourages them to act like fucking psychopaths. But they're legally required to do it.
It's nuts. It's
a bad
fundamentally
system.
Nuts and wrong. And I thought it was even funnier that this all happened at the drag queen bar in Florida.
Yeah, that's great. Because the people there were probably like, "Oh shit, like I'm a tenant."
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like I rent.
They're all laborers. Like, oh my god, it's so frustrating. I've never been in a room with so many bad people before.
Yeah. And if Michael Knowles was there, he would say the bad people are the drag queens and not the landlords.
Exactly. And I think it's just the perfect example of just neoliberalism.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, let's do it at this progressive bar, and then let's just have the most regressive talk and take on this issue.
It's pretty brave to have a drag queen bar in Florida.
That's what I was thinking.
That's gonna get
I was
shut down.
surprised, but the place is it's actually fucking dope.
Oh no, I'm sure, but I'm just wondering when Ron DeSantis is gonna march in there with his brown shirts.
Yeah.
I mean state officers.
Exactly.
And shut down the place. You know what I mean?
Because like their whole deal was like, bro, it's actually like sick. We were thinking about going back the next night because we went on a Tuesday, but Wednesday nights are the actual drag shows at 9, and drinks are $1.
Oh, look at that.
So it's like, hey, yo.
Quite the business model.
That's what I'm saying. The drinks are $1, and then there was karaoke night right after the landlord presentation.
And hopefully no fucking landlords that time.
Exactly. Hopefully landlords don't come back. And then there's like a RuPaul's Drag Race watch parties on Friday nights.
That's a pretty cool place.
That's what I'm saying. Not cool landlords, though.
Not cool landlords, and good luck to that business. I hope you don't get clobbered.
They probably had to host it because one of the dudes running it owned the place.
Probably like, yeah, you lease from me.
Exactly.
You're going to let us do this. Welcome back to the show, everybody. Today we got to talk about CPAC. CPAC is back.
CPAC is back. It seems like it's always back, like all the time.
We got to talk about a little bit of you losing your rights in select states.
That's right.
Some femboys. Femboys are going to make it into the news this week. We'll talk about the Adventures of Meatball Ron. We got some extra news for you.
A little bit of banks collapsing.
Banks collapsing for sure.
Joe Biden hates billionaires. Based.
Just like me, for real.
Literally just like me.
But before we get into the show, I'm going to remind you all, as always, as our two very special guests last time around.
That's right.
mentioned to you all, make sure you go become a patron. If you want access to early episodes, you can do it there. Become a patron. It's not expensive, I promise, but it helps out the show.
It's not. You can spend however much you want.
It helps out the show greatly, and we would greatly appreciate you. And you could even get your name shouted out at the end of the episode.
That's right.
So,
it helps
something to think
us
about.
Maybe in the future make more content.
Even
well,
more content. That's the goal.
If that's something you like.
That's the goal, right? I mean, we're making money moves. That's all I'm going to say.
Money moves, mogul moves, you know what's going on.
Also, check out the YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Discord. It's all in the description below, and we'd love to see you around the community.
And if you want to support the show completely for free, you know you could always go and leave a 5-star review on Apple.
That's
like
true.
These wonderful people just did.
We have many 5-star reviews to read today.
That's right.
We got 3 5-star reviews from Apple and a couple from Instagram, I believe.
Instagram.
So let's start off by reading this review from VWPDX. Great pod. They say, the boys still bring the heat and entertainment at the same time. Just want to say I've been looking forward to each week for the pod. I started driving a truck over the road and I started driving a truck over the road, and the pod is just a great break in the mundane day of driving. Sorry, I'm having trouble reading today. I don't know why.
It's okay.
I also think you deserve to make a career you love entertaining the leftist masses. $10 just wasn't enough for such quality content, so I hope to give 25. So I hope 25 gives you even more motivation to keep entertaining us and making us laugh even through tough times.
Now that's what I'm talking about.
You will never be disappointed, and if you haven't done so, go back and listen from the beginning. Oh, that's a brave move.
That's crazy.
I not only listened on Sunday with the Patreon Sunday Superstars, but I also listen along with the Wednesday Weenies. Sunday Superstars, that's a good name.
That's a good one. I like that. Become a Sunday Superstar. What can I say?
Yeah, Sunday Superstars are pretty gas. And look, I mean, openly saying I had to upgrade to the 25, I get it. You know,
I get it too.
I do personally understand, and we really appreciate you. Thank you for the review. Next review, Jolton for Bolton by SGKSTL. They say, very simple, very brief. Love this pod. I look forward to it every week. I like it when they keep it brief, but I also like it when they gas us up. So it's a balance, you know what I mean?
You know, exactly. You need both.
Yeah. Last one here from Apple is by Shells. 2 out of the handful I like. They say, as a raging feminist commie from the horrific state of West Virginia that always votes against their best interests, this podcast is a breath of fresh air. 2 people around my age hold the same beliefs as me. Crazy, even though thinking people should have housing, food, and healthcare should not be something radical. It apparently is. I love these guys and love to get an overview of the news every week without it having such a negative view, even if it's not good news. They always make me laugh and feel like I'm just talking to some friends about what's going on in the world. Cannot wait to recommend this pod and Patreon to people.
What can we say?
That's a perfectly concise, brief, direct.
Excellent review.
Excellent review.
Excellent review. I also can't wait for you to recommend the pod and Patreon link to other people.
That's what I'm saying.
You know what I mean? Now moving over to Instagram, we got the first review by Nolan Weens. Hey boys, I left a review on Apple Podcasts a few weeks ago, but I'm from the country that doesn't exist, so I'm sending it here where you're more likely to see it. God fucking damn it.
Canada.
Exactly. He's from Canada. As Emma pointed out in the Discord, Canadian listeners, there's something weird about like the Apple reviews cross countries from Canada to us, so we can't see your reviews on Apple. So
we're just an American business, you know what I'm saying?
Exactly. We're just the backbone of America, a small American business.
Exactly.
So that's why we can't see them.
Hoping
frankly.
to be big one day.
So if you are from Canada, drop them in the Instagram and we'll read them just like this. Beautiful based boys. From a Canadian neighbor up north, it's been truly wonderful to discover y'all through TikTok and to find genuine human-centered takes on political and social happenings in our world today. There's something very cathartic about being able to laugh and groan at our current state of affairs with 2 guys who, while I've never met them, I feel like I could be good friends with. Keep up the class-conscious work, boys. Nolan.
Maybe you will meet us one day. We could do a fan meetup somehow.
That's true.
Definitely not in Canada.
No.
No chance.
No.
It's not real. Can't even go there.
Never. Next, 5 stars from Emma S. As a young lefty and freshly hashed egg, it's great to be able to keep up with news with 2 relatable hosts that actually genuinely care about trans issues, especially with the increasingly hostile atmosphere of politics recently. Oh boy, do we have an atmosphere for you this episode. Holy shit, it got bad this week.
Buckle up, folks.
Yeah, absolutely wild when I hear reviews saying they're adding you to the pod rotation, because Hiddo is my whole rotation.
Let's go.
Definitely considering leaving the Wednesday Weenie Club to join the Patreon. Looking forward to further developing this parasocial relationship with y'all. Much love and keep slaying.
Look, some people go to church on Sundays. Others listen to Head in the Office on Sundays.
That's what I'm saying.
It's a type of religion, you know what I mean?
I've been saying this. Come to the Sunday sermons.
Hiddoism. Become a Hiddoist.
Oh my
That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you all for the reviews. If you want your review read, you know what to do. Apple Podcasts.
Exactly.
Or if you have to, send us a review on Instagram, and we'll read it too. But you already know. Time to get into the news. We got to talk about CPAC.
CPAC's back for like the fucking 40th time. I remember when CPAC used to be special.
Used to be yearly.
Yeah.
We used to take a look at it yearly, but now it's like once every 3 months.
Literally.
They got a fucking CPAC somewhere.
Stupid.
But we're talking about CPAC again, and as we've already kind of foreshadowed, it's lots of trans panic, transphobia that went on at this CPAC.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're susceptible to that kind of stuff, content warning. But we're going to get right into it. So last Saturday for us, there was a CPAC convention where all the worst people gathered to talk about the next genocide they want to do. Some really great figures in attendance. For example, Kari Lake, who is a failed candidate for governor of Arizona.
Yeah.
Donald Trump was there. Michael Knowles was there, which you probably all saw, which we will talk about very soon. Marjorie Taylor Greene was there. But notably, Meatball Ron DeSantis, was missing from this year's CPAC. Or I guess this
month's CPAC. This quarter's CPAC, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. And we, unfortunately, did not get an invite.
You know, maybe eventually we'll be able to get a press pass.
Yeah.
That'd be so cool.
Yeah, I see those guys sometimes, like on TikTok and YouTube, etc., that are like, they like infiltrate the conservative events, you know what I mean? And they pretend to be conservative.
I feel like we could.
Yeah, we're probably not known enough to.
I don't think so. I feel like maybe one day we'll be able to leverage our followers and be able to pretend like that.
That'd be pretty cool.
Because like, there's no way they vet everyone that applies for a press pass like that.
Oh, definitely not. Well, if they did, they'd have a lot of people on lists. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Speaking of Kari Lake, though, she gave a speech at the Reagan dinner, which apparently is a thing, where she carried on with her election lies, saying that she actually won in Arizona, that she's actually the governor, but they stole the election from her. She's just doing the Trump thing, but on a much smaller scale, obviously.
And that's also crazy because that's like the only thing I've ever heard about Kari Lake.
Kari Lake, yeah.
Whatever, however you say it.
Yeah, that's kind of her thing.
The only thing I ever hear from her is the election. I've never heard, you never hear policy from conservatives anyway.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like I barely hear culture war from Kari. I know she's obviously racist, xenophobic, transphobic, like here and there, but it's mostly just I won the election. Yeah. And she's been able to cement her name with that.
I mean, yeah, it's working so far, and as we'll talk about soon, she's considered pretty highly. She's seen in a pretty high regard by a lot of conservatives at events like this, at the very least.
Wild.
Yeah, no, it's interesting to me. And I didn't know this until recently, but I felt it incumbent upon me as a political commentator and as an observer of the political absurdism that is today. Yeah. I felt like I had to include this. But this was from a CPAC in August of 2022. Okay. So another quarterly CPAC that I don't know if we covered that one or not. But Kari Lake,
I think wasn't that the one where Marjorie Taylor Greene sang the national anthem with the dude with the dogs out in the cage?
Oh, maybe that might have been.
That probably just overshadowed this bit.
Yeah. But this bit was great. Kari Lake, she spoke there. This was before her election, so I guess she wasn't as national of a figure just yet. But she said, quote, DeSantis has BDE. Anybody know what that means? Ask your kids about it later. I call it Big DeSantis energy.
That's why she lost. That right there should be 100% why she lost. That is the corniest fucking shit that I've ever heard. Oh my God. That's also so horny.
Do not ask your kids what BDE means. And they call us the groomers. What the hell?
No, literally not her horny posting at CPAC.
And then saying like, talk to your kids about this. Yeah, this was at a speech she said that. I thought that was...
at the Reagan dinner.
I hadn't seen this clip before, but it came up somewhere because I was just watching coverage of CPAC, and I was like, oh shit, I gotta include that. Oh That's so good. Trump also spoke at this event, a speech that was apparently very long that I did not watch for the show. I didn't have the commitment to push through it this time. Notably, though, Trump did say, I think maybe on Truth Social, I guess that's the only place he is, that the crowd was like huge.
He said it was packed. Yeah.
It wasn't. I've seen photos of Trump.
It was actually barely half full.
Yeah.
And it was very quiet and boring.
It seems because they're taking on this quarterly model, that CPAC is I don't know, losing some popularity, losing some steam. Doesn't seem like there's as many people as normal at these events.
They're literally just shoving it down everybody's throats. Like, it's not even fun to cover anymore.
Yeah. And he still didn't say Meatball Ron. Trump didn't say Meatball Ron at the event, which is really disappointing because he's taking small jabs at DeSantis still, obviously, but he's not going in and saying Meatball Ron.
Didn't this happen at the last CPAC that we covered too, that Trump was at, where like he claimed that the place was packed, but it wasn't?
Probably. I mean, he does this at a lot of speeches. It might have just been, it might have been his announcement speech for 2024 where he wasn't letting people leave.
Oh my God!
They were trying to leave. Trump, his main motivation still is he just wants applause. He just wants people to like him. That's all Trump's ever wanted. Also, like as I said, DeSantis wasn't there, but I think Nikki Haley was there, and she also gave a speech.
Where was John? Where was John Bolton?
I don't know where John Bolton was. But Nikki Haley was there, another contender for 2024. He gave a speech, and it didn't really seem like people liked her that much.
Figures.
Obviously, and I think she tried to take a few jabs at Trump, but like if you're not going to like actually throw a punch, doesn't really matter.
Exactly, just like if Trump won't throw a punch at DeSantis by calling him Meatball Ron.
Now, each CPAC, they do a straw poll for who they should put up in the primary for the next presidential and vice presidential nominee for the next election.
Yeah.
And they did this again, and Trump won handedly at 62%.
Of course.
Of CPAC people. Then DeSantis was at 20%, and Perry Johnson was at 5%.
Who the fuck is Perry Johnson?
If you all don't know Perry Johnson, I don't blame you, because I had to look him up as well. Apparently, he's one of the gubernatorial candidates for Michigan that got disqualified for doing actual voter fraud. You remember that?
Yeah, we covered that.
Half the ballot got taken off because they were doing actual voter fraud.
6 conservatives got taken off the ballot, and it left like 2 people left in the primary.
I think it was 5 that got taken off for doing signature fraud when they're trying to qualify for the ballot, and then 1 guy that got arrested by the FBI because he was at January 6th, and that left like 3 or 4 or something like that, and then Tudor Dixon won, of course.
Yeah.
So that's the Perry Johnson apparently is in the running. I don't know why.
Shout out Perry Johnson.
I don't know why. But there's also a VP straw poll where Carrie Lake won the most votes at 20% of people wanting her to be the vice president. And then DeSantis at 14 and Nikki Haley at 10%. And then everyone else didn't get anywhere above 5%. Not that these are scientific in any way, or that even if polling data was done, that we should fully believe it. But that's what the people at CPAC think, at the very least.
That's what the conversation makers at CPAC, the leaders of the conservative intelligentsia,
the thought leaders of the conservative
that's
movement.
the word I was looking for.
In this country. And now I want to move on to probably the most viral moment to come out of this CPAC, and that was a speech given by Michael Knowles. If you don't know Michael Knowles, he is a demon in human skin.
Yes.
He works at the demon company known as the Daily Wire.
I'm also like not surprised that you wouldn't know who Michael Knowles is, because he's like one of those guys who was like, funnily enough, he was one of those guys who was like Matt Walsh before Matt Walsh popped off for transphobia, in that like he never really went viral. I think he did a small debate with Hassan at the beginning of COVID, and he got rolled.
Yeah.
And the only clip I ever remember like actually watching of his before like this, and I guess the last like couple months or something, was his political compass test video, where he was just an actual Nazi. Yeah. And then he came today and was also just an actual Nazi.
Yeah. Michael Knowles also, until recently, had a podcast with Ted Cruz called The Verdict with Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz left him to go join some other podcast, though, so that no longer happens. And I think Michael Knowles was independent for a while and then joined up with the Daily Wire, similar to Jordan Peterson, and I think Matt Walsh as well, Candace Owens, of course.
And like what they tried to do with Crowder.
Yeah, exactly. Word. So Michael Knowles is kind of just like this C-list conservative guy.
Which
not very prominent.
That's so embarrassing to be a C-list conservative pundit.
He's always been the more religious type out of the group, I feel like. He's always the one that's pushing like Christianity more directly than anybody else is.
Oh, yeah. He's like the theocratic fascist, both out putting it in his bio like Matt Walsh used to do.
Yeah, Matt Walsh did that. But anyway, Michael Knowles gave this big speech. We're not going to listen to all of it, but we do have a small clip that went viral where Michael Knowles is just kind of being a Nazi.
Being evil.
So I want to, let me cue this up for you all real quick, and we'll listen to it, then we'll discuss.
There can be no middle way in dealing with transgenderism. It is all or nothing. If transgenderism is true, if men really can become women, then it's true for everybody of all ages. If transgenderism is false, as it is, if men really can't become women, as they cannot, then it's false for everybody too. And if it's false, then we should not indulge it, especially since that indulgence requires taking away the rights and customs of so many people. If it is false, then for the good of society, and especially for the good of the poor people who have fallen prey to this confusion, transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely. The whole preposterous ideology at every level.
And that's where this Michael Knowles clip ends. And as you can tell,
that's fucking insane.
Already, yeah. I mean, just off rip when
Yeah.
you listen to that and you hear eradicated, you hear, the whole preposterous
Eradicated
ideology.
from public life. Like,
Yeah.
what could this mean?
Yeah. No, shortly after this, a lot of people correctly, very angrily, pointed out that he's basically just calling for the eradication of trans people.
Yeah.
And we'll dissect the argument in a moment. Not that it really needs dissection if you have eyes and ears and, can think critically. But then the Daily Wire, which is, of course, his company, threatened to sue outlets on libel charges if they printed anywhere that Michael Knowles was calling for an eradication of trans people or a genocide, which is something that, you do when you're definitely not calling for a genocide. Now, there's two real ways in my mind that we can interpret this. One is more correct than the other, but I want to address both because I think they get you to the same end result.
Yeah.
The first one is the more generous and charitable understanding, which I don't think Michael Knowles deserves.
No, absolutely not.
But because we're political commentators, I'm going to dive into it, and I think it's worthy for us to talk about in case there's any people on the fence that this is literally just I should do a genocide and it should be okay. So they say transgenderism, right? And there's a reason he chose transgenderism over just saying transgender people, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But for them, what they want to say is that transgenderism is just an ideology like liberalism or conservatism or leftism or communism, etc. Yeah. It's just another political ideology that people might adhere to, and it has nothing to do with who you actually are, right? That's the kind of argument that they want to advance. And we can even, for a moment, presuppose that there isn't an onslaught of legislation targeting LGBTQ people, gender-affirming care, gay marriage, etc. Let's just...
If we were to just take this on face value.
Take it on face value, entirely remove it from the current context of right-wingers actually trying to do a genocide, and just look at what Michael Knowles said directly. So to him, transgenderism is this idea that you can identify as a gender that's different from what you're assigned at birth, and maybe within this idea is another idea that you and other people should respect that identification, right? If you change your pronouns, if you change your gender identity, that other people should adhere to it and let you do what you want to do with it. And of course, be respectful. Now, the thing here is, of course, you can do that, both legally and throughout all of history. People have done this. So it's not really a matter of ideology, and for reasons we've talked about extensively, trans women are women, trans men are men, because gender is a social concept that has been very malleable throughout all of human history. So it's not as though this is some kind of new concept. So to say that transgenderism, again, this idea that you can identify as a different gender, needs to be eradicated, you are saying that people should not be allowed to identify as a gender that aligns with their identity, and therefore those people should be eradicated, even if not through violent means, say directly killing them, but they should be otherwise oppressed or suppressed by some kind of power. I'm assuming it's state power.
Because how can you separate the expression of your transgender ideology with a transgenderism, right?
Right.
He says explicitly there should be no transgenderism in public life. What does that look like? Can men not wear women's clothing?
Right.
No matter how, innocuous that is? Can I not go out and wear pearls anymore?
Right.
Can you look at a man and say, you're looking a little too feminine today. This is transgenderism. This must be eradicated.
Yeah.
What does it mean? This goes so far beyond the conservative arguments that we've been seeing about unfair competition in sports. Maybe minors shouldn't be able to do surgery.
Bills, that kind of thing.
Just go straight into talking about people's self-expression.
Right, because you'll notice in the speech he's saying that there's no middle ground, right? He starts off this clip that we pulled, which is about a minute long. You can't really say it's out of context. It's a part of the fucking speech. He starts off with there is no middle ground. If it's true for adult men and women, then it has to be true for children as well. He's saying it is all or nothing. Therefore, all transgenderism needs to be eradicated from public life. And of course, what does that mean if transgenderism is just the idea that you can identify as another gender? You were saying that people shouldn't be allowed to do that, and therefore force or some kind of violence, if it's not, physical murder, is required to make that reality into existence.
Exactly.
And that's the charitable reading, right? And it still gets you to genocide.
Exactly, because it still is a genocide because you are functionally just erasing them.
Yes.
You are erasing anyone that identifies as trans by either forcibly making them not, or either just getting rid of them, or just simply making it so that no one is trans anymore, or they have to completely suppress any element of being trans. But again, what does that look like? What elements of self-expression are you limiting here?
Yeah, and who decides, right?
Exactly.
Like who gets to draw the line?
Is Dennis Rodman trans when he went and cross-dressed?
Yeah.
When he went and wore dresses?
Is Michael Knowles trans for like doing whatever he's done as a theater kid?
No, literally. Also, just why are so many Daily Wire conservatives just failed theater kids?
Yeah.
Crowder's not Daily Wire, but he was a theater kid.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Knowles was a theater kid, and Ben Shapiro tried to be a Hollywood writer, and now they're just bitter. So in that bitterness, they decide to be transphobic.
Well, it's like all of them failed at being screenwriters or theater kids or whatever it may be, and now they're cosplaying as the Fourth Reich? Like literally doing Nazi
like they
shit.
wanted to be like the peak liberal. Like they wanted to be in these fucking liberal elite circles, and in their bitterness, they decide to do genocide against trans people.
They just couldn't make it.
The leap is absolutely fucking crazy.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely terrible. And then there's also the observation that Michael Knowles says something along the lines of doing this or like respecting transgenderism requires taking rights and customs away from people. He doesn't elaborate on this, of course, and he can't because it's nonsense. Like, what rights are you taking away? He
doesn't elaborate on anything, and that's what's so scary about it, right? Because in not elaborating, you leave room for people to take the narratives that they've pushed about bathrooms. Like, oh, men are going to pretend to be women and go in bathrooms and do sexual violence. They're going to take those crocodile tears, essentially, and they're going to turn that, and they're going to allow their lack of context to let you infer what the solution should be. It's the same thing as when Charlie Kirk says we need to deal with this like we dealt with it in the 60s.
Yeah.
What else does that mean other than lynching and physical violence?
Yeah, and of course that brings me to the more accurate understanding, and I think the correct understanding of what Michael Knowles said, which is that it's infinitely more likely that Knowles used the word transgenderism because he knows that it's not a real thing, but when people are listening to him, it gives him plausible deniability to avoid charges of being an actual Nazi. Because you can say transgenderism, call it an ideology, but actually mean we need to get rid of all trans people, which is what I think he is saying. It's speaking in coded language, hiding behind technicalities so you can give yourself that deniability while the people listening know that you mean I want to kill all trans people.
And then you can conveniently just never define what transgenderism is.
Yes.
And also never define why it's bad. Because again, this has jumped so far beyond what like the current conservative arguments are about like medical procedures, hormone therapy and shit like that, and just gone to, no, you absolutely cannot identify as anything that isn't in your pants, which is already wrong for reasons that we'll get into when we cover other transphobic legislation later.
It's like we called it, right? Like when this whole trans panic first kicked off, say a year ago or so, and it was already kind of happening, but it's certainly, I don't know, magnified since then. And we knew at that point, it's like, well, if you think that trans people or like just this idea that trans people existing can indoctrinate or groom kids into wanting to be trans, then you are calling for the genocide of all trans people.
Yeah.
And they weren't at that point yet. Up until recently, the Daily Wire's official position was that adult trans people are fine, just leave the kids out of it. But here, this clearly shows that people like Matt Walsh and Michael Knowles are saying that the mere existence of trans people in public means that kids will be indoctrinated into wanting to be trans, and therefore to protect children, we got to get rid of all trans people.
But
That's
we'll never explain why that's bad.
Exactly.
We'll never explain why it's bad for a kid or anyone to have feelings that they are a gender separate from what is in their pants.
Yeah, yeah.
It's ridiculous.
It's also like transgenderism isn't a thing.
Yeah.
It's not a political ideology like they think that it is or they're saying that it is. Being trans is just like, it's a state of being. It's a way of identifying yourself. That doesn't have anything to do with political ideologies. It only has anything to do with politics because conservatives make it that way.
Exactly. Isms are turning into just another euphemism. It's like when conservatives add ism to something, it's just turning it into a new slur. We have wokeism where they're talking about black people and women too, and sometimes. And then we have transgenderism just to shit on transgender people. It's crazy. And then feminism already, but whenever they invoke feminism, like Michael Knowles did in a speech he just had at the University of Buffalo titled Feminism, Why It Destroys Women and Everything Else Too. They're just shitting on women.
Naturally, even though men have had their hands on power for all of human history, everything is women's fault.
Exactly. Because as soon as women got credit cards, everything went bad.
It's true. Deindustrialization got to be women's fault.
And that's crazy because this is a less publicized speech that he did at University of Buffalo. But in it, he's literally talking about how women were better off when they were housewives, and they don't understand how back then women understood their place and they knew what was good for them. And it's like, dog, women couldn't have credit cards. They had no financial freedom. They were literally trapped in houses with abusive husbands. Like, come on now.
Yeah.
He's just a bad person all around.
And this gets us to the question that a lot of people ask, which is, why can't Republicans just leave trans people alone?
Yeah.
And as we've said, as we've kind of predicted since the beginning of this whole trans panic, it's this idea of the social contagion, right? Mm-hmm. It's this idea that because trans people are allowed to exist in public, the ideology of transgenderism, quote unquote, will spread and encourage more people, specifically children, to become trans, and that's inherently wrong, and we won't explain why. It's and therefore allowing trans people to exist in public is unacceptable, right? It's this far-right idea, which is also aligned with, Nazis and other fascist groups, that social contagions will spread, and we have to contain them by getting rid of this group, and right now it's transgender people. It's what right-wingers do.
It's like they won't explain why these things are bad, or very much like homophobia discourse.
Yes.
And why conservatives are homophobic. They'll just appeal to God in the most vague ways.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also... If you're trying to write legislation based on a religious belief, you need to explain why this thing is morally wrong or can cause damage to society outside of just it's written in the Bible, when in most cases it's not even written in the Bible and it's their own misinterpretation.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that a lot of these, moral panics, hateful campaigns are cloaked in religiosity, right? They hide behind, this is what the Bible tells me to do. But you bring up a good point with homophobia, because this is unambiguously the exact same playbook they used against gay marriage.
Yeah.
They said that if kids saw gay couples in public, that the kids would be convinced or indoctrinated into becoming gay. Of course, that didn't happen, and that's not how anything works.
Oh my God, I saw two gay guys kissing. I just want to fucking suck cock.
This idea that there's like a social contagion that's going to infect children and therefore, cause the decline of Western civilization is fundamentally a fascist one.
And that it's bad.
And that it's bad, of course. And then they never explain why it's inherently wrong. It just is wrong because of some religious belief or some belief that they can never fully explain or articulate.
Exactly. But the Democrats are the ones limiting your freedom.
Yeah, no, exactly.
It's
right.
leftist communists in the Senate that are trying to limit your freedom as a conservative. But we're also going to limit your self-expression in the most fundamental ways by even maybe dictating how you dress.
Mm-hmm.
Like, come on, because where does this end? Where does transgenderism, as they're not defining it, end?
Yeah.
Again, is it in dress? Like, what? It's just limiting self-expression in such weird ways. This is legitimate government overreach.
Right, like if state officials on the left or liberals, whatever, ever sat down with them and they're like, okay, like once and for all, let's just deal with this. It's not just going to end after that.
No,
like they're not just done once they say, trans women can never compete in sports ever again. It's going to keep going. They're going to keep finding more and more things so they can build their exclusionary society. And of course, that's never a finished project, because exclusion means you got to keep going.
Yeah.
Right. It's the idea of the purity test. We talk about this with whiteness a lot, but of course this would apply to heteronormativity as well. It's just this continuous race to the bottom of who can be the most hateful. And right now, Matt Walsh and Michael Knowles are fucking winning.
Oh, absolutely. They're ahead of the curve.
They are certainly ahead of the curve.
Much ahead of their peers. And it's like, it does not end at the T. It will go back to the LBG after they get what they want with it, because they fundamentally disagree with anything that isn't heteronormative. And then once they get to heteronormativity, again, they will continue to race to the bottom and dictate how you can be and how you can exist in public and even private life. Because if you can't exist like this in public, how can you in private life?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where's really the separation here?
Yeah, and if you ever find yourself in an argument with these kinds of people, which I honestly don't think there's that many people that will confront you with these kinds of beliefs, or at the very least, I don't even think that there's that many people that will like say this like Michael Knowles is saying this.
Oh, no.
But if it's ever the case, like I would just recommend the Socratic method. Like, what is transgenderism?
Exactly.
Why is this bad? Because there's the beliefs that they hold are so immaterial that they can't explain them, because there's no justification at all.
Because they aren't beliefs. Like if you're encountering a regular everyday conservative and they're repeating these talking points and you question them on it, they aren't beliefs that they hold, because there's no justification for them. They're just parroting talking points. Like that's really it.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's often, conservatives will often be like, oh, well, look how many more trans people are in society today. Look how many more trans youth identify as trans, or look how many more teenagers are saying they're bisexual or gay or lesbian or whatever it may be. And it's like, yeah, the world's become a bit more inclusive, or at least our nation has become a bit more inclusive over the last decade or few decades or so. And that's a good thing, because that means more people are free to express who they are. And that's a component of freedom.
And that is what freedom is.
Yeah.
Self-expression is fundamental to freedom,
Yeah.
right? And then they overstate this narrative so much, and they overstate just trans violence and anything to do with trans people so much that in polls like what we posted on our Instagram and Twitter, there are conservatives that think that aggregate polling, there are conservatives that on average think that 20% of the country is trans.
Yeah, that's fucking nuts.
Insane.
Yeah.
Less than 1%. Less than 1% of the country is trans. It's insane. And most of that 1% like did it when they were adults.
Like, you think 60 million Americans are trans? You're out of your fucking
One
mind.
in 5 people. You think 1 in 5 people are trans?
Like, these are the same people that have never seen a trans person before.
Literally.
It's nuts that you... Like, it's so out of touch with reality that you could ever think that, 21% or whatever of the country is trans. Like,
exactly.
And that was just an average, so people are guessing higher.
Or they've seen a trans person and didn't know.
Yeah.
Because most of the time you don't know. Like, there was a moment that went viral this week. I can't remember exactly which state this happened in, but some governor was again about to sign an anti-trans bill, and a trans person went up to him. I think it was a trans mask. Like a female to male. They were passing, though. And it's important to say that they were passing because they went up to the governor and they said, what bathroom should I use?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Because how do you answer that?
Yeah.
What bathroom should they use? If your whole point is that men can't be in women's bathrooms because you're using the crocodile tears of sexual violence to just be anti-trans, what bathroom does that person use? Yeah, they may have a vagina, but they are a man.
Yeah, exactly.
Are they going to do sexual violence to the people in that bathroom, or like, just by existing there? Or should they go use the men's bathroom because you interact with them as a man? You in meeting this person have never seen them as anything other than a man, and that's what gender is. It's how you interact with the world socially.
Yeah. And that actually, like, those kinds of rigid bathroom bills actually make it more likely for violence to happen, because if there's someone that, completely passes as the gender they identify as, yet they're trans, making them go into the bathroom of the gender that they were assigned at birth is probably going to lead to them getting into more violence.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Especially
because imagine in that case, it's a trans man who completely passes as a man, looks like a man for everyone.
But oh my God, they have a vagina,
and
he has a vagina,
and you make them walk into the women's bathroom. Like, people are going to be suspicious about that because they pass as a man.
No, because that
just opens you up to more violence.
What's going to happen is women are going to see, like, oh my God, a man is walking in the bathroom, because again, they interact with this person as a man, because gender is social. It's formed through our social interactions and how we're socialized, and they may do violence on them to protect them, because like, a man shouldn't be in this bathroom. There's no way to go about this in transphobic manners that can lead to a better outcome for society, to a less violent outcome in society, to a less harmful outcome. It's absurd.
Well, I mean, the only option is let people use the bathroom they identify with.
Exactly.
Because trans people are not the ones that are violating people or sexually
They're not the ones that are doing harm.
It's actually cis men doing it for the most part. So, I mean, that's another thing to keep in mind. What was the statistic that more GOP members of Congress have harassed people in bathrooms than trans people have? Something like that.
I think there's that one, and then there's also the one when talking about immigration that I think it's like you're more likely to be sexually assaulted by a native Texan than an immigrant or something like that.
Yeah. So just keep in mind, none of their worldviews are ever supported by empirical data.
No.
That's another important thing to keep in mind. Moving on to taking your rights away.
Oh, yeah.
That ends us off on CPAC and Michael Knowles. I hope you all survived that.
Doesn't end on transphobia, though.
No, we're continuing the transphobia for sure. But first, we're visiting Tennessee.
Exactly. We've covered the rhetoric. Now it's time to cover the legislation.
Last time around, we talked about how drag queens were on the chopping block. You had it good for too long.
Yeah.
It was your turn to take an L. And I have an update on the drag queens bill a little bit later. But right now, it's time to talk about how anyone who isn't straight, anyone a part of the LGBTQ is on the chopping block. Because again, you had it good for way too long.
Yeah, exactly. You guys have been oppressing me as a cis man.
You've been able to marry for, what is it, less than 10 years? That's far too long for this guy. So In Tennessee, Republican Representative Monty Fritz recently passed a bill in their state house by a vote of 74-22 that will make it so county clerks and local officials cannot be made by the state to solemnize marriages, meaning that county clerks and local officials can refuse to marry any two people based on, and this is in the bill, quote, the person's conscious or religious beliefs, meaning that county clerks, local officials can refuse to marry gay couples. That's what this bill calls for.
And it's also like, surely this can be extrapolated to other things.
Oh, like interracial marriages.
Within the case, not even interracial marriages, but just to other things like what we're seeing at the Supreme Court this term with, you don't have to make a wedding cake for gay people. It can just be other forms of discrimination. Yeah. Discrimination is bad, guys.
Well, it's like Obergefell v. Hodges passed, which says no state can refuse to marry two people, right? Legalize gay marriage. I have no doubt that this law or a similar law will face some kind of litigation and end up at the Supreme Court, and then Obergefell's gone. Oh, right? Because we know the justices are already looking for an impetus to get rid of Obergefell. Clarence Thomas has already said that he wants to. I'm sure the rest of the conservatives would vote for it as well, or at least 5 of the 4, or 5 of the 9, and that's all you need.
Yeah.
So I can already see where this is going to go, and if not within the year, in a couple of years, whenever this makes its way up to the Supreme Court. So that's not
crazy.
Great.
We could have 3 absolutely just society and democracy ending years of the Supreme Court. First with Roe v. Wade being overturned,
of course,
and then next with Moore v. Harper.
Probably no more democracy.
Probably just giving a bad decision, and then next year maybe Obergefell.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Just undoing all of the progress we've done in the last 50 years.
Just freedom ending, democracy ending. Anyways, this representative stated that he doesn't know of any situation where anyone's ever been forced to solemnize a marriage when they didn't want to. But this bill is necessary because, quote, their civil rights are under attack.
Whose civil rights are under attack? You are literally making up the boogeyman. Like, usually you say that to say, like, oh, they're talking about an issue that doesn't exist, but simultaneously, as he's saying this issue isn't a problem, he is also saying it's a problem. The absolute state of American conservatism is cognitive dissonance.
Bro, shadowboxing so hard.
Holy shit.
He
said, but I wouldn't want to. If I had to do this, I'm not ordained, but I wouldn't want to do this.
It's literally, my rights are under attack because other people are finally getting rights, and I don't like that. Therefore, I should be able to discriminate. It's the let me discriminate against gay people bill.
It's the thing, I can't remember who said it, but it's equality feels like oppression to those who were previously like dominating or some shit like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, oppression,
to the oppressors. Equality feels like oppression to the oppressors.
Yeah, something like that. And now when this lawmaker was questioned by a Democratic member of the Tennessee legislature, the bill sponsor said that it has nothing to do with LGBTQ people. And to his credit, it doesn't say LGBTQ in the bill at all. It just says the state can't make you solemnize marriages, even though it's not a problem. But of course, the question is, why else would this be needed? Pretty unambiguously, this is just a bill that says local officials in Tennessee can refuse to marry people if they don't want to. And when he says like religious or personal conscious beliefs, it means like if you don't like gay people, you don't got to marry them.
No, literally.
That's all that means. And of course, they can. They could say in retort to what I just said, they could be like, "Oh, well, a local clerk could refuse to marry straight couples," and it's like, okay, but very few people are ever going to do that.
Who is going to do that?
And if anyone ever does that to you, like just to be a dickhead, just to push back against this law, you can go to the next county over and make it happen. If, like, say, I don't know, half the counties in Tennessee are like, I'm not marrying gay people anymore because they're conservative Republican districts, conservative Republican counties, then what do? You just don't have rights. You know what I mean? Because marriage unlocks a lot of federal rights for you. And if you can't do it, you can't do it.
Literally saves you money. Unlocks Social Security, things like that. Oh, my goodness.
And similar to the cake thing that you just mentioned, it's literally not different from I don't want to have to serve black people at my restaurant.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Of course, this is local officials versus, say, like a private business. But it's all the same form of discrimination where it's like I should have the right to exclude other people from my place or this institution, my restaurant, whatever it may be. I don't see it as really any different. And the backsliding of our rights is not cool.
Wait, so the text of this bill is literally just they don't have to marry anyone they don't want to based on person's conscious or religious beliefs?
Right, yeah.
They could literally just refuse to marry black people. Like,
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think this bill is more so for gay people.
It's absolutely targeted at gay people when we consider the current atmosphere of just anti-LGBTQ legislation going through. But again, this is extrapolated to just any person that's marginalized.
Yeah.
Because no one is gonna do this for straight people.
Exactly.
No one is gonna refuse to marry straight people. But there are plenty of racist people, and there are plenty of anti-LGBTQ people that exist, especially in Tennessee.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what if you're an interracial couple in Tennessee and they're just like, oh, sorry, I'm not going to marry a white woman to a black man.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, like, under this bill, that can happen. Like, this makes more problems than it solves because there is no problem to be solved. And he admitted it. He said no one's ever been forced to solemnize a marriage they didn't want to. So ridiculous.
Golly.
And the bill passed, like, no question. It was crazy.
Of course it did. Of course it did. The absolute state of conservatism right now.
Exactly. So I promised we would talk about the drag queen bill, and we are going to.
This is the one that got outlaws drag in public, says male or female impersonators cannot be present in public, and we brought up what about theater?
Yeah, literally, what about theater? There are people in our comments bringing up what about just trans people in general? Are they just going to be considered male or female impersonators? And I think that's a pretty salient point as
Absolutely,
well.
yeah.
So it might just be illegal to be trans, although that isn't for entertainment reasons, so maybe they can dance around that question, but yeah.
Probably not. Yeah.
This was the bill that will make it punishable, and this bill did pass, by the way, which is why I'm bringing it up again.
Wow.
And it's going to make it punishable for you to be in public in drag or in the presence of children in drag with up to 6 years in jail on second offense.
6 years?
On second offense. First year's 1 year in jail and some kind of fine.
Isn't that more time than what's his name, Jordan Belfort served for stealing money from so many people?
Probably.
That's more than people serve for actual real crimes.
Well, it's a worse offense.
Yeah, when you consider the moral degradation of Western society.
You guys just tuned into Matt Walsh. Now, this bill, of course, was signed by the governor in order to pass. That's how things work. And right after its passage, there's a little bit of scandal that popped off. This is on the same level as Rim Job Text, in my opinion. Not quite as crazy as that one. That was a classic.
It's Femboy Friday at the governor's house.
That was just about a year ago, was Rim Job Text episode.
I think so.
If you all remember that one, shout out for being around for that long. But we're talking about Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally, who's Lieutenant Governor of Tennessee. He was just recently caught in a scandal because McNally, he's the one that oversees all the bills that pass in the state Senate. That's what his position requires in Tennessee. And of course, he's been around for the passage of many anti-LGBTQ bills, including the anti-drag bill. There's one for anti-gender affirming care.
Yeah.
And obviously all the other bills. And this bill for anti-LGBTQ marriage might also pass as well. So that'll go through the Senate. And after the drag one passed, it was recently revealed that Randy McNally, Lieutenant Governor, has a habit of commenting on the posts of one particular constituent. And I'm not sure how well this section's going to go over as an audio medium because it has to do with images on Instagram. But if you want to look this person up, you can. His name is Franklin McClure. He posts rather revealing, promiscuous photos.
He's slaying in those pictures.
On Instagram. You can look him up if you want to. He's a 20-year-old guy who posts, very little clothing, sometimes no clothing.
Femboy type.
He's got makeup on, that kind of stuff. And Randy McNally, he's this, 60, 70-year-old white guy. Very straight, very Republican. And he was commenting on these photos. So I want to read some of the comments that he left. He said, great picture, Finn. Best wishes for continued health and happiness. This is under just a naked photo. That was censored. He's not showing dick on the timeline, but it was under a censored photo. He then said on another one, super look Finn, under a photo of him in underwear. Then he said, Finn, you can turn a rainy day into rainbows and sunshine, under a photo of just booty cheeks. That's what the photo was. He also commented a lot of hearts and fire emojis under photos as well.
He comments on posts 50-year-old married men with kids comment on teenage girls' Instagram posts.
Oh yeah, bro's in love.
It's crazy.
Bro's fully in love with this dude.
Holy shit, ready to risk it all.
Yeah, and now Randy, obviously, my boy Randy McNally, hasn't responded a lot. I did see a press conference with him, or he was just caught by reporters or something, and it looked like he was fucking sobbing. He's been caught. But the thing is, he was commenting with this government account.
Why would you do that?
Not even an alt account, just straight up the Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally account. So that's interesting. His team has responded by saying he just likes to connect with constituents. And it's
he's trying to connect with this constituent, let me tell you.
Oh yeah, this is the classic homophobe turns out to be gay, or
Exactly.
I don't know, gay curious. I guess.
I guess we need femboy lobbyists in Tennessee.
Oh, that would work probably.
I think it'd get it done. I mean, we have the evidence right here.
Yeah, obviously very silly. It's fun to joke about this kind of thing.
Oh my God.
The more sinister part is that he's passing laws that restrict the rights of LGBTQ people while possibly being an LGBTQ person, or at least seemingly acting that way in this comments of this guy's photos.
Yeah. It's again the cognitive dissonance here.
Yeah.
Like I don't understand it. I don't fundamentally understand it. Like there's something within him that he's just denying, and it's incredibly sad.
Yeah.
However, I can't feel bad for him because of the position of power that he's in and the evil things that he's doing with that power.
Yeah, like you could do something about it, you know?
Exactly. Like you could stop this.
I can't feel bad for people in positions of power. As I said, I think last episode, if you're in a position of power, you should prepare to have your ass blasted all the time.
For sure.
Not in a sexual way. in a news coverage kind of way.
Exactly. In a I'm gonna make fun of you kind of way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
Precisely.
Yes.
Are we moving on to Kansas?
Absolutely. Traveling to say we don't cover too much. I don't think we ever talk about Kansas.
More rights being taken away, though.
Exactly. For sure.
Don't fret.
We have a slurry of anti-trans bills coming out of Kansas, and I think one just general anti-woman people who can get pregnant bill.
Okay, nice.
Still got to carry on with the after effects of Roe v. Wade being overturned. So the first bill, we have Senator Renee Erickson introduces Senate Bill 180 titled, quote, Establishing Women's Bill of Rights to Provide Meaning of Biological Sex for Purposes of Statutory Construction.
This is the J.K. Rowling bill right here.
No, that's exactly what I thought when this was going on. She hit the crocodile tail, she hit everything. So this bill defines a person's sex as what they are biologically assigned at birth, classic TERF. The bill then goes on to define female and male by saying, quote, a female is an individual whose biological reproductive system is developed to produce ova, and a male is an individual whose biological reproductive system is developed to fertilize the ova of a female.
Oh, fuck infertile men.
No, because that's exactly this definition fails where literally any of these definitions fail when they're trying to define gender or get rid of the difference between gender and sex, right?
Yeah, man.
And it fails in that it just fails to recognize the existence of intersex people, infertile people, and people with reproductive abnormalities, right?
I was just about to say, if you're a woman born that can't produce ova, then I guess just fuck you, you're not a woman. You're just outside of the law.
And that's exactly what I wanted to talk about here, because there are infants born with, it's called androgen insensitivity syndrome, where they are very clearly females from the exterior. They have vaginas, yet they also have balls that never fully descended through the inguinal canal, and they don't have a uterus.
Right.
What do you do about that? They're assigned female at birth.
Yeah.
Like, they don't really find this thing out until a little bit later, right? Like, there was a famous track athlete. We talked about this, like, last year when we were talking about anti-trans bills. Famous track athlete. She was running, but her testosterone levels, I think, were a little bit too high.
Yeah.
Or she was running too fast. And so they ran tests on her to see if she was actually a man. And it turned out she had undescended testicles. But it's like, again, when we get into conversation of gender, socialized as a woman their whole life, interacts with the world as a woman, you would not know that she wasn't a woman unless you fucking literally looked at her insides to see that she didn't have a cervix or didn't have a uterus.
Yeah.
Where are they defined in this bill? Because those people are real and they exist even in Kansas.
Right. And I do think it's very interesting. And I'm assuming even if this bill doesn't extend to like children and sports, etc., there are going to be similar bills that extend to children and sports, etc. And as we talked about with Ohio months ago, the only real way to know if trans women are competing in sports is by checking yourself.
Yeah, penis inspections.
The mandatory penis inspections. And I do think it's funny how they're doing this in the name of freedom and protecting women and then subjecting them to the most insane invasion of privacy you can ever imagine.
LGBTQ people are groomers for existing in public, yet I want to look at your pee-pee.
Exactly. Just to make sure that you can play sports.
Yeah, but that's it. That's the only reason.
It's fucking insane.
But like the justification for this bill within its own texts is that they needed to, quote, protect safe spaces for women because men are bigger, stronger, and faster on average. And the bill appeals to very real fears of gendered and sexual violence from women, but obfuscates the actual solution, social and cultural change, with scapegoating transgender people. Again, invoking fears of men in women's bathrooms going crazy and doing sexual violence and shit like that. It's crocodile tears to the fullest.
These are the same people that were against the Me Too movement. Like, how are you going to say that you're protecting women against men who are typically stronger, bigger, et cetera, can impose their will onto women, and then you were against it when there was a massive nationwide movement to call out men who have done just that?
Exactly.
I don't understand where this is coming from.
Oh my God.
It's coming from a place of hating trans people,
exactly, and that's why it's so disingenuous, and it's so sinister that they would invoke real issues, like actual real issues, and just scapegoat it on another minority. That is the essence of American conservatism. That's what they always do. Again, economic insecurity. Immigrants are coming over and taking your jobs. Any bit of violence, black people.
Yeah.
Don't get me started.
And now look, okay, I'm a cis man, right?
Yeah.
I'm a cis heterosexual man. I've never doubted my gender identity or anything like that. I do consider myself to be a feminist, but of course I'm just an ally in the greater movement. But I don't think having rights is like a zero-sum game. No. And I don't think femininity, or I guess masculinity as well, because you don't want to exclude trans men, nothing is taken away from either of those concepts by people that are assigned a certain gender at birth being able to switch and come into the group that you consider yourself to be a part of. I don't view it as a loss of masculinity for trans men to be able to identify as men and take on masculine features.
Absolutely.
And why would I? That seems like kind of a weak mental mindset.
It has nothing to do with you, because it fundamentally has nothing to do with you, how other people want to express themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like, I know the greater emphasis is placed on trans women, people who are assigned male at birth, and then identify as female, coming into feminine circles and saying, like, I want to take on the characteristics of femininity. And then they're accused of, taking femininity away from women. Men are stronger, imposing their will, etc. And it's like, the way that they prove this to be like an epidemic or a large-scale problem is by finding like 3 journal publications or 3 like news outlets that are like, oh yeah, this trans woman is woman of the year. And like, that's the narrative, right?
It's this trans woman is woman of the year. Notably in the hearings
or
for
the
this
Hershey's
bill,
thing that just popped off where they had like a trans woman in an ad for International
in the
Women's
hearings
Month.
for this bill. Some articles I was reading this morning, they were talking about how this one swimmer, not from Kansas, from Kentucky, came to Kansas to sit in on the hearings and comment on a Kansas bill despite not being in Kansas. And she was talking about how, actually Leah Thomas almost beat me. She didn't actually beat me. We tied for 5th in the 200 backstroke or some shit. She didn't actually beat me, and we actually tied, so she didn't affect me at all, but that's unfair, and I was subject to an unfair sporting situation.
Holy shit, dog.
She is invading, she wouldn't call her she, is invading my female-only space.
What the fuck? You won. Like, shut the fuck up.
No, literally, like, you also tied. Like, Leah Thomas did not affect your standing in this at all.
Didn't Leah Thomas win first place in like one race?
One race.
And they got like 5th and then 8th and then something else?
Tied for 5th with this girl.
Yeah,
and she's talking about how she's been personally been affected by transgenderism.
Like, Jesus Christ.
Oh, yeah. It's so bad.
It's so insane to me that conservatives think there's some kind of advantage of willingly opting into a marginalized group that has been marginalized for a long time, that is only receiving hate from their end, rather than just like stay in your own group. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're saying like, there's so many advantages to identifying as trans. Like, no, there's not.
No.
They're hated by people like you conservatives. They're ostracized by other people that don't understand like what it means to be trans. And they still face enormous obstacles in terms of like, say, getting the medicine that they need, or even now just participating in public life.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, you got conservatives calling for their eradication.
Or
like, come
just
on.
trying to fucking play sports like this next bill I have here, House Bill 2238, the Fairness in Women's Sports Act, which targets 2 public school students in the states and requires that female student athletic teams only include members who are biologically female. That targets 2 people, 2 transgender athletes.
So is this bill going to base biologically female, quote unquote, off the previous bill?
I would imagine, yeah, since that one is establishing like the definitions for statutory purposes. This is just building off of that to establish like if you're running a female sports team, they have to be female at birth.
Yeah. So again, women that are born as women and identify as women later in life, they can't produce, I don't know, what they need for reproductive health, then I guess they can't participate in sports.
Or they're missing ovaries like some women are. They don't have ova that can be fertilized. Oh no.
Exactly. And this is why we've talked about so much that you can't define gender, a social construct, based on biological sexual characteristics. You can't do it. You're never going to find a definition that necessarily does not exclude some people that you would consider to be a part of a group that is women or men or whatever else it may be. You just can't do it. It's too malleable of a social concept to work. And these are 2 fundamentally different categories, sex and gender. And even sex isn't a binary, because intersex people exist. Binary means only 2.
Other just configurations of your chromosomes exist. Like, and that's like, it just fucking infuriates me because Michael Knowles, Matt Walsh, prominent transphobes like them will go look into any biology textbook and they won't tell you there's more than 2 genders. Yes, they will. Every single fucking one of them will tell you that gender is a construct. In my genetics class, my professor, and we were talking about chromosomes and we were doing genetics. She's like, she made sure to say at the beginning of the unit, gender is a spectrum, sex is different, and there are sexes outside outside of the limited binary we're going to be talking about in class for sake of simplicity, because this is an undergraduate course and you're just taking the regular fundamental genetics class.
Yeah.
You're not going deeper into it. And even we did go deeper into it to talk about the existence of intersex people, people with XXY chromosomes, people with XYY chromosomes.
Just an X,
the different fucking formations of chromosomes that people can have, because it's not a binary. It's so much more complicated than that.
Yeah, surprising. Human biology is very complicated.
Yeah.
And it's like, even then, they would just be like, oh, well, that's woke liberal indoctrination. Like, that's not a legitimate education.
Those people exist on the margins, therefore they aren't to be treated with respect or like they're humans at all.
1% isn't millions of people.
Exactly. They can be outcasts.
But that's the thing, and other people, other political commentators on our side of the aisle have recognized that as of last several years, there's not really an argument anymore. Yeah. Because they will just continue to back up and say like, oh well, it's chromosomes, oh well, it's I don't know, fucking however they define it here, developmental processes or whatever it is. But once you debunk all of those and you say like, oh well, actually, if you open a biology textbook, that's not what it says, then they just say, oh well, it's wokeness. Then that's all this is.
It's the woke liberal scientists that are writing those textbooks.
Not an argument. It's non-falsifiable. You can never prove it to be true or false.
Yeah.
Like, and then where do you go there? Like, all of this is just their justification, their really bad justification for hating trans people and wanting to get rid of them.
Anything that goes against what I believe and the things that I've cherry picked is actually woke.
Yeah.
And therefore it's biased, because the things I like are never biased.
Exactly, yeah. And this is why there's lots of talk of detransitioners nowadays.
Which is crazy, because they're like 1% of the 1%
of course,
people.
Regret rates are super low, even when it comes to surgeries, or even if we're just talking about gender affirming care outside of surgeries. Detransitioners are very rare. Not that they're not valid in their own experience. You can listen to those people, but they're they're not nearly the majority. But you'll hear a lot of people talk about detransitioners now, and they'll cite studies where it's like, look at all these detransitioners. You look at the study and realize the study is not saying there's a large slew of detransitioners that are coming out. And then eventually you get to the bottom of their argument, which is just, oh, people could detransition in the future. It's like,
people could regret this choice in the future. It's a life-altering change. You can never go back. People could regret plastic surgery in the future. Do we go to outlaw that? No. Conservatives also never talk about, when they're talking about surgeries, like gender-affirming care specifically, they never talk about minors that are going and getting plastic surgery, because that happens.
Yeah,
like, that's a thing that happens. Minors get nose jobs with
exactly. If you
permission.
break your nose, you get a nose job. That happens a lot.
Exactly. Not even just breaking those. Minors go and get cosmetic surgeries with parental permission. But conservatives never talk about that, because that's something that even if we're going beyond just like if we're getting a little intersectional here, that's going into something that reaffirms patriarchal standards of beauty, right?
Yeah.
When a minor, because let's be real, a lot of conservatives are pedophiles.
Yeah.
Matt Walsh saying 16-year-olds are the prime age for marriage. You know what I'm talking about.
People agreeing with that.
People agreeing. Matt
defending
Gates,
that argument.
Matt Gates sex trafficking a 17-year-old. Either way, I digress. When a minor, specifically females, women, goes and gets these cosmetic surgeries to make them feel better, they are reaffirming patriarchal beauty standards. That's what you do. It's another form of gender affirming care, but it's one that's not deemed ugly by patriarchal constructs. And that's the reason why they are against gender affirming care in the case of transitions, because it's deemed ugly.
Yeah.
They don't like it visually. Yeah. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and there's also like people will get breast enlargement surgeries, or people get breast reduction surgeries
because back problems.
Both of those are forms of gender affirming procedures, but of course, they don't reject those
there
ones.
There are other reasons. They don't reject the nose jobs. They don't reject any
and
of that.
They'll say like, oh well, gender affirming care, like if you're transitioning, is life altering. It's like, that's the point of medication. It's to really be life altering. Your life's supposed to improve afterwards and change.
Exactly.
Like, why else would you take medicine or do any procedure if not to, like, people will regret like foot surgery, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
or like hip
absolutely.
surgery, getting like plates put into their, I don't know, back or hips or fucking whatever doctors do nowadays. It's like, yeah, people could regret it, but most of the time they don't. And if they don't, then like, what's the problem?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, I got this life-altering surgery to get rid of a toxic kidney.
Yeah.
I got this life-altering surgery that was a heart transplant because I was going to fucking die.
Also, you heard about the person that left the Daily Wire? After the Michael Knowles, there's a person who left the Daily Wire after Michael Knowles went off the rails, and she also cited like Matt Walsh as being too transphobic. Yeah. She's obviously not an ally.
Not
She's
a good
still
person.
A conservative, but she doesn't like how far they go. And she had an interview with Vosh, and say what you will about Vosh. If you don't like him, that's fine. But the interview was pretty decent, where she was saying like, oh well, once trans youth, and she doesn't believe trans youth is a thing, but let's just say once trans youth, start doing procedures like puberty blockers, then they're on this conveyor belt and don't feel like like they need to opt out until far later when they regret it and want to detransition. It's like, again, non-falsifiable argument. You can't know that. There's no data to support that argument, of course. So you're just saying like, oh, this is probably the case because I feel like it's right. And it's like, that's
my
not
intuition is telling me that this is right. Therefore, I'm going to craft policy that harms people.
All of her arguments are like, oh, well, I have detransitioner friends. And it's like, those are anecdotes. Like, it doesn't matter.
Also, and it's like, what? The 3 detransitioners that are like willing to go and be a conservative token?
Yeah, and get paid for it probably.
Exactly, because that's the other thing. Like there are other detransitioners that don't have negative things to say about like their experience. They're just like, yeah, actually, it just wasn't for me. Like I think it's like I don't know if they're controversial or not. Grayson's Project on YouTube. Watch a couple of their videos. They were like a detransitioner. It just wasn't for them.
Yeah,
but they don't go on and shitting on trans people. I don't think. I don't think
those people should also have access to medical care to help them get through whatever they're dealing with.
Exactly,
and that's why I support Medicare for all.
Let's go.
Anyways, are we back to the anti-women bill?
We're back to
okay.
Not even again. Mike Thompson, a Kansas state senator, introduced Senate Bill 233, which aims to require revocation of the medical license of any physician who performs a gender reassignment service on a minor.
What are they defining as gender reassignment?
I don't know. I didn't get to it. I didn't figure it out, but I can imagine it's
puberty blockers,
HRT, any form of surgery for sure. 100%.
Yeah,
but this is absolutely wild that Mike Thompson is practicing medicine without a medical license here.
Yeah, no, actually.
Like,
well, that's like they've learned from the Texas bounty hunter bill that this is the way to do it, right? Is to go after doctors, so the doctors are too afraid to prescribe medicine or do any medical treatments, so that you can just cut it off at the start.
Exactly. Very apt that you brought up the Texas bounty hunter bill, because that moves us into the general anti-woman bill. We have Senate Bill 5, introduced by Mark Steffen, that bans the prescribing of drugs intended to cause an abortion using telemedicine and restricting the governor's power during a state of emergency to alter the prohibition, right?
Wow.
This is something that I would imagine would lead exactly to what the Texas bounty hunter bill led to. If you don't remember, when the Texas bounty hunter bill dropped, pharmacies in Texas stopped dispensing methotrexate.
Yeah.
Like they just refused to dispense methotrexate to women. Mm-hmm. Methotrexate is a drug to treat rheumatoid arthritis.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say.
But it also happens to be a drug that treats ectopic pregnancies. The treatment for an ectopic pregnancy just happens to be an abortion.
Yeah.
So this gets my wheels turning. Wonders, are they just not going to be able to describe methotrexate to people who need it to treat their fucking RA anymore because they can't rule out whether or not she's going to use it for an abortion? Are you going to have to go through pregnancy tests? Are you going to have to do all these things just to show your fucking doctor? These are all, they all resort down to invasions of privacy.
Oh yeah, well, massive invasions of privacy, and even just more generally when it comes to like bodily autonomy. Again, it's just the state forcing you, or I guess taking away options when it comes to pregnancy.
Exactly.
It's just giving you no other choice but to give birth. You're just a vessel if you can get pregnant.
It also begs the question, why only ban it over telemedicine? Why only ban the prescription of these drugs over telemedicine? And
maybe
not
it's
just
easy to use
in general. Exactly. It's to get rid of this ease of access before they take the next step and just overall ban these things in limiting women's access to abortion.
Yeah. Was it Kansas that just voted down the abortion ban? That might be why they're doing it this way. I think it was Kansas.
Are you talking about in the midterms, like where they like the wording was weird on the bill and they actually reaffirmed people's rights to women's right to an abortion?
Right, exactly.
I think it was either like Kansas or Kentucky or something like that.
I think it was Kansas that voted down or either voted for, I can't remember, one of the two, because the wording was weird. They approved a measure that would make it so that abortion rights aren't being taken away because they have like privacy laws in states like Kansas and other states as well. I think Kansas was among them at least. So maybe that's why they're going after it this way, because the voters said, hey, don't do this. And they're doing it anyways.
That would actually make a lot of sense as to why they're strictly targeting telemedicine in prescribing these things. Gotta love the lengths that conservatives will go through just to get rid of rights.
Yeah, because if they do have like a personal privacy amendment within their state constitution, then they got to find ways to not violate privacy, but also make it impossible to get an abortion.
Yeah.
And I got to imagine Planned Parenthood doesn't have much of a presence in Kansas already.
Probably not.
So just making life worse for people. The Republican motto.
Yeah, no, literally.
Moving on to Meatball Ron.
Okay.
This one could have fit very easily into taking your rights away. That was the last section.
Absolutely.
But I wanted to make its own section because there's a couple Meatball Ron stories out there. So I'm aptly titling this "The Adventures of Meatball Ron."
That's nice.
And I thought
kind
that was
of whimsical, if you ask me.
Just a little bit. So our boy Meatball Ron DeSanctimonious is back at it in the news for a couple of reasons, starting with abortion, actually.
Oh, wow. Carrying on. There's such a flow to this one.
So currently in Florida, the law is that you can get an abortion at any time during the first 15 weeks of pregnancy at your leisure whenever you need to, after which there's only exceptions for the life of the mother, no exceptions for rape or incest after 15 weeks. There's a new law being proposed that is to ban abortion after 6 weeks, with exceptions for rape and incest up to 15 weeks. But to get an exception, you have to either have filed a police report or have some kind of medical record to prove that it was like rape or incest, which of course won't exist in most circumstances.
Exactly, and also just an invasion of privacy. An interesting thing I've seen brought up about this is, how do you prove something like spousal rape?
Yeah.
It's
he said, she said, right?
You just it's he said. Most rape cases are he said, she said anyway, and I still believe women. But in cases like spousal rape specifically, like, you're not going and getting a rape kit anytime something like that happens to you. Unfortunately, like, you're not getting medically examined for anything like that because it's such a innocuous thing.
Well, especially because, like, if you are in that situation, it's likely an abusive relationship anyway. Exactly. So how safe do you feel to really go and do that for yourself?
And then
like,
how safe,
to go to the police? I mean, like,
exactly. How safe do you feel to then interact with, like, not legislators but judges and try and argue your case against your already abusive husband?
And by then, like 6 weeks or 15 weeks, I guess, if it's a rape or incest. Yeah, like 15 weeks is going to be up. And as we know, after that clock hits 15, or I guess once it hits 16 weeks, they'll just say no, like, you can't do it.
Oh, absolutely.
And they'll drag it out to the point where you can't do it. And it looks like Ron DeSantis has signaled he's going to sign this law if it passes. There's not much analysis to really offer. It's just Republicans being evil, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just them restricting your rights. That's really what it comes down to. I don't really know what else to say. The practical effect here, obviously, is that people in neighboring states like Georgia, other Republican states nearby, will not be able to go to Florida for abortions because Florida had it until 15 weeks.
Does Georgia have it more restrictive?
I think so.
Oh, my goodness.
I think so. But Florida, of course, had it until 15 weeks, which isn't great, but is longer than a lot of other states, a lot of other Republican states at the moment. And most abortions, of course, happen after 6 weeks because you don't know if it's just a late period at that point. So it's just, Republicans harming people, making it difficult. And this is really a big blow for people living in the South because Florida's a long state. You know what I'm saying?
Let me tell you.
And if you are anywhere in the South, you can't go to Florida. You got to find somewhere much farther north, possibly like Illinois or I guess Michigan.
Or if you're just near the bottom of Florida, say Fort Lauderdale, you're driving for 8 hours just to get into Georgia.
Yeah. And
more than that.
If you need an abortion, it's probably the case that you don't have the money to do that.
Exactly.
So that's Ron DeSantis and his Republicans in Florida just hurting people. Just hurting people. That's all it is. So that might pass pretty soon. Now, in other Ron DeSantis news, though, he's going on a mini PR campaign where he's talking about the book ban allegations. We all remember those. We've covered this before. Yeah. Stop Woke Act, etc. Now he's calling them a hoax. That's what the tour is basically premised around.
Really?
He's calling them a hoax. Right now he's saying that the photos of empty bookcases in Florida classrooms are not real. They're just made up. They're all hoaxes. He's saying that the books that we got rid of or the books that we've prohibited all have pornography or sexual acts in them, and that's all it is. That's what he's claiming. That's the book tour he's going on.
We covered this about like 2-3 months ago, right? When it first dropped. And wasn't it something like you couldn't have any books in classroom that were just overall deemed inappropriate?
Right.
But they didn't set guidelines for what was inappropriate beyond no like gender ideology or no sexual anything and shit like that. But
the Stop Woke Act, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, so some of the banned books in Florida lists that are going around, some of them are fake. Like some of them include like To Kill a Mockingbird. That one's not actually banned in Florida. But the images that we see of bookcases being totally empty are completely real. And the reason they are empty is because the state of Florida has said, we have to approve all of the text that you have in your classrooms, personal libraries, and the school library. And if we find one that has like pornography, what they consider to be pornography, or like, LGBTQ topics,
anything inappropriate,
then your school's going to be hit with some kind of penalty, possibly criminal penalties on certain teachers and that kind of thing. So as a precaution, as a sort of chilling effect, you got to get rid of all your books.
Yeah.
And those pictures are real. It is not a hoax whatsoever. But this has been a Ron DeSantis campaign he's been doing recently.
It ties back to what we were talking about with Michael Knowles and how fascists intentionally keep their rhetoric ambiguous.
Yep.
So that you have to fill in the gaps and you have to sort of self-police. And that's what these Florida teachers are doing. They have to self-police themselves to avoid getting these immense fines levied on their schools and maybe even losing their jobs just for having lending libraries so their kids can read.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it's just, I guess big government's fine if Republicans do it.
For sure.
That's the moral of the story. My last Ron DeSantis, I should say Meatball Ron.
This one was wild.
Tidbit that I saw is that he's being accused of overseeing actual torture in Guantanamo Bay. Now, for those unaware, Guantanamo Bay is often referred as as Gitmo, is a prison facility that opened in 2002 in Cuba. It's basically where we would take prisoners, or I guess just detainees that we found in war, and would hold them without imposing criminal charges and do torture.
Yeah,
that's what Guantanamo Bay
brown
really is.
People that George Bush assumed were terrorists.
Yeah, it's kind of just the worst excesses of empire, and that's kind of what we did in Guantanamo Bay. Now, Ron DeSantis is being accused by a former detainee of Guantanamo Bay. His name is Mansour Adafi. He's saying that he was held in Guantanamo Bay for 14 years without ever being charged with the crime. And during
super just, it's something you do in a just society.
Yeah, no, definitely. And while being held in Guantanamo Bay, Ron DeSantis didn't directly torture people, but oversaw the torture of a lot of people. And this guy specifically said that he was a hunger strike that he was undergoing with other prisoners was being broken by them force feeding him, which is a very violent procedure for those that don't know.
It's okay. He abstained from the trolley problem, so he's not morally culpable.
Yeah, and the funny thing here, I guess it's not really funny,
yeah.
but the I don't know, interesting thing here is that a retired Navy captain came out in defense of Ron DeSantis and said that DeSantis, Meatball Ron, was not actually in charge of torture. He was in charge of taking the complaints of prisoners and addressing them in a humane way.
He addressed the complaints of the tortured prisoners,
which I find very unlikely because it's not like Gitmo was known for its accommodations. I don't think we should be under any confusion when we're talking about Guantanamo Bay. That place is exclusively for harming people.
Infamous for just being an awful place.
Yeah, and I think there was, what was it? There was another colonel that was basically saying, or not a colonel, somebody that worked in the Navy that was saying, like, yeah, Ron DeSantis worked there. Obviously, a lot of things that happen at Guantanamo Bay are classified because we were torturing people, and we don't want that to get out to the public as much as it already has. So there's not a ton of information that we have, but other than these allegations, but Ron DeSantis did work there. He was employed there to some extent. He was in the Navy. And he's kind of just ignored these allegations and not really addressed the information as a whole.
Nice.
But, yeah,
I'd imagine that's a boost for some conservatives in his base. He's like, oh, yeah, get him.
And the important thing here is that a lot of people will think, a lot of, right-wing, right-adjacent people will think like, okay, yeah, torture's bad, but if we have to get information out of terrorists to stop some kind of terrorist attack, then it's okay.
The means, brother.
Tortures at Guantanamo Bay were never for information out of terrorists, or rarely were. It was just for hurting people.
We also know that torture doesn't work.
Yeah, well, of
torture
course.
is not a reliable means of extracting information.
Yeah.
The Bush administration got in trouble for that, or some shit like that.
Well, in trouble.
Well, yeah, as in trouble
George Bush
as
is
American,
still a free man, right?
as in trouble as any American president has gotten for their numerous war crimes.
Yeah. And Guantanamo Bay is still open, by the way, in Cuba. Obama had pledged, or at least said he wanted to close it, and he never did. It's still in use. It's still operating today. Pretty awful place.
Yeah, crazy. That kind of goes like somewhat under the radar still.
Yeah. So maybe this will be an issue for Ron DeSantis in a primary, or maybe even in a general election if he wins. They can say, you literally oversaw the torture of people.
Yeah.
You can say, yeah, maybe I oversaw it, but I never did it.
I actually listened to their complaints actively.
Yeah.
I welcomed them with open eyes and ears, and I listened.
We'll make the food that we're force feeding you taste a tiny bit better. I'll put some sugar in there so it's not as sour. I don't know.
Yeah.
Moving on from the Adventures of Meatball Ron, we got just a couple extra news stories to wrap up this episode. The first one is the new January 6th footage that has been going around, and I was reluctant to even include this because it's literally nothing.
Because it
doesn't prove
also
anything.
Like it's not really even new footage. It's just footage from different angles, and it doesn't reveal anything that we didn't already know.
Yeah, the one thing that stuck out in my mind was Tucker Carlson covering the what's his name? The dude who ran. Do you remember his name?
The QAnon shaman?
No, it was one of the congressmen, a senator, Josh Hawley.
Oh,
Josh Hawley was running down the hallway. People called him Josh Hallway. Everyone made fun of him. Tucker Carlson was like, the liberal media went crazy about this, but we've got new footage, and it was literally just a couple seconds that was cut off from the beginning of that footage where Josh Hawley was running behind a couple of other senators.
Oh, nice.
And that's what changed everything. Was that Josh Hawley was like fourth in line or something?
It was that, and then like it was also the fact that like oh my god, we follow pretty much strictly conservatives on Twitter. It
sure fucking seems like it.
It sure seems like it. And we just get pushed conservative shit all the time. We don't even follow strictly conservatives. It's just we're constantly pushed conservatives that we don't follow.
I think Elon Musk admitted to adjusting the algorithm so that
you see things from the
people that
other
are
side.
deemed to be liberal see more conservative stuff, and vice versa.
We must be deemed to be fucking anarcho-communists, I swear to God, because the shit that they put on our feed. Anyway, I digress, but they're just going crazy. This changes everything. All these videos, the cops let them in. Why isn't the media covering this? And like, yeah, I can kind of give you some like plausible deniability there, and that liberal media, I guess, maybe is obfuscating that. But we've been here since day one talking about like, yeah, the cops let them in. The cops are shitty too.
Yeah.
Cops vote 80% for Donald Trump. They vote 80% Republican. We've known since the riot happened that the cops opened the doors for them and opened the gates and were escorting them through. In some instances, they had broken in and the cops were just following them to make sure they did nothing wrong.
Right.
But the footage release changes nothing.
Well, it's like there are videos of like cops being nice. We've seen videos from like protesters that they took with their own phones where cops were like being nice, shaking hands, laughing with them, and we criticized it then. And then we see more footage of cops doing this, and it's very clearly either cops being dumb or them trying to de-escalate and not get like mauled by 20 people that are with them in the hallway. Like it's very clearly probably a de-escalation tactic right there. And the thing that's interesting to me is that like, so much of the January 6th footage and photos that we have, regardless of the context they're in, are obviously still very incriminating for all of the people there.
Oh, yeah.
They broke windows. We saw them break windows. They were chanting that they, like, where's Nancy Pelosi? They had the gallows outside for Mike Pence. Like, it doesn't matter.
Zip ties.
It doesn't matter if you see, like, a group of them walking around just looking at stuff, like, going on what they said was a tour. It doesn't matter at that point.
No.
Like, they wanted to kill Nancy Pelosi. Like, what's the point? Like, I don't understand how anything could have changed anything. No, it's ridiculous.
It really couldn't. And I've also seen the take that like, I don't understand how they've just martyred Ashley Babbitt so hard.
Right.
Like, that is insane. I saw some person tweet, I can't remember who it was, Ashley Babbitt was the only person who actually died on January 6th. There were protesters that fucking tased themselves to death because they had brought tasers. Like, what are they doing with those? Like, oh my goodness. There are protesters who got killed in like not stampedes, but like they had been run over by people, by the crowds that were rushing into the Capitol.
There was a couple of cops that either got like trampled on or were just like straight up beaten by protesters. I know there was the one that testified during January 6th. I can't remember what her name was, some officer, and she was saying like, yeah, like they kept pushing us back and I was getting trampled and stepped on, and like she has injuries now to this day from that event. And it's like, yeah, like I obviously like no new footage is going to change that. And I don't know, they treated this as a bombshell to try to like defuse any arguments against them and remove their own responsibility, but obviously it's not going to do anything.
And it's like even some things that they're criticizing, we've been criticizing since day one, but for the right reasons. Like I saw a bunch of people talking about how like, oh, the Capitol Police were given the Congressional Medal of Honor for their defense of the Capitol, but look at what they're doing. They're not. It's like, yeah, we've been criticizing that. Like we've been saying that that's corny, that they let the protesters and then did all this.
And then Congress just like slid millions and millions of new dollars to the Capitol Police, even though they didn't do their job last time. Yeah, no, exactly. The last little news story we have here is on a bank collapsing.
Shit's crazy.
I can't tell right now if this is going to be a big deal or not. I
just don't know right now.
We're in like early 2008 right now, so we'll see if this is a big deal. But basically, Silicon Valley Bank, which is this bank that has a lot of money from like tech companies, tech bros, that kind of thing.
A lot of like startups and venture capitalists have money in this bank.
Recently just kind of collapsed.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, because the FDIC only insures up to $250,000 of your money in a bank, a lot of companies and people are afraid of losing, millions, billions of dollars.
Yeah.
And that's kind of all I know about the story at the moment. I'm sure it's more complicated than that.
That's what we'll probably cover it more in the next like week or two when more information comes out. But the general gist of it from like what I've seen is that the bank made a move late one night to cash in on a lot of the treasury bonds that they've had before the bonds matured and actually made the profit. They cashed in on like $25 or $28 billion in bonds and took a $1.8 billion loss. Investors saw that. The bank didn't communicate that they were like just moving money around, and like they did some weird thing with risk management, and they also did a really weird thing with just not communicating to people who had their money in the bank. They tried to start raising funds, and that triggered like alarm bells in investors. So investors pulled their money out, and it's kind of caused this death spiral for the bank. This is just what I read yesterday when I was trying to figure out what's going on. I probably don't know what I'm talking about. But this is the take right now. I had also seen that this is a direct result of the CEO of the bank lobbying Donald Trump's administration to repeal regulations that directly would have stopped something like this from happening, from repealing risk management legislation.
Yeah, and that is kind of the take here, is that a lot of people have been saying like, oh, this is happening under Joe Biden's administration, of course, because he doesn't know how to run the economy. And it's like, there are very few things that you can actually blame on the current president when the previous president did tons of deregulation. Like, obviously, the effects of deregulation are not going to be felt in the same term as the president, especially if that president loses the next election and a new guy comes in. So yeah, obviously it's the fault of deregulation, like most of these things are.
Oh, absolutely.
And I wouldn't be surprised if this bank gets bailed out eventually, because for those that don't know, I mean, people that had their money in that bank might have already, you know, had lines of credit out or bought things from other companies that they're now not going to be able to pay for. And then those companies that were having products purchased or services, equipment, etc., aren't going to be able to pay their bills. And then it's a ripple effect throughout the entire economy. I, for one, generally, as a rule, am against bailing out banks of any kind.
Absolutely.
If you're a wealthy fuck that loses their money, should have been more responsible. Bootstraps.
Facts. There's also like the take that I've been seeing is that Bidenflation caused a bank to crash. And it's like based off the fact that I think it's like treasury bonds. When inflation gets higher, you like make less money on your treasury bonds and shit. And that's part of what caused Silicon Valley Bank to just cash in on their bonds before maturity. But also that would have been stopped. They wouldn't have had to do that had the risk management things not been repealed beforehand.
Right.
That's like what I kind of vaguely know about it now. I'm sure more information will come out, and I'm sure the effects of it will come out too in the coming weeks.
Yeah, so we'll cover it more later on. There is, of course, also the point that a lot of conservatives have still found a way to blame it on the gays. Yeah. There was, I think, either at one point or up until the crash of the bank.
The current head of risk management
was a LGBTQ woman, and they were like, look, this is why the bank crashed, because they went woke. So they're finding a way to blame gay people still with really no evidence to support it.
So cool.
So yeah, that's kind of the situation on that. So if you see anything about SVB or Silicon Valley Bank, you'll know that we covered you up.
Exactly. Kind of.
We'll continue to observe it and investigate.
There's also something that happened. I think Joe Biden proposed like a 25% billionaires tax or something.
Oh, that's sick.
And raising the corporate tax rate to like 29%.
Oh yeah,
because shit like that.
There was a moment in a press conference where they were, or I think it was 28%.
Yeah.
Someone in a press conference was like, "Well, 28% so high," and he was like, "That was the tax rate under Ronald Reagan, that very liberal Ronald Reagan guy." So that was a nice moment from the last week.
That's dope. That's a fun punch, but like he should be dishing those out in the bigger televised ones.
Yeah, that would be cool. He needs to have more of the democracy speech moments where he just calls them fascists.
He needs to emphasize the bully in the bully pulpit. That's my take.
He needs to go after them.
Exactly.
Pump them up with
blast their asses. Come on, Joe.
That's what I'm saying. Pump them up with adrenaline. Give him some, I don't know, whatever drug is going to hype him up to get him going on the next.
Whatever
speech.
you've been running him on.
Yeah.
Just up the dose.
Please get into it. I think that brings us to the end of the episode. I hope you all enjoyed this episode. I hope it wasn't too sad.
Facts.
Too scary.
Lots of bad legislation.
But speaking of good people, bad people pass bad legislation.
But good people
support us on Patreon.
Exactly, precisely.
So special thanks to those people.
You want me to take the first half?
Go for it.
Special thanks to Cricket Scrapbook Layouts, Nikki Nine Lives, Caden Kraut, Lord T, Chris the Postman, Christy Beck, Talia Kotz, 40% Spite, Andrew Harris, Mike Chaplinsky, Mattias T, Omar Zuno, Clayton LaFed, Mark Yeager, Sarah McRoberts, Dylan B, Kaz, Caleb, Joy, Jim Bob, Carl D, Rich Toro, Tari, Gavin Mayer Maldonado, Hunter W, Fergalaki, Max Vasquez, Jacob Rogers, Colton Mooberry, Fixer Punk, Jim Egbers, Jeff Muzzy, Ted Cruz's Boy Toy, Bagel Burrito, Cincy Alex, Bread, Joe Stenstrom, Austin Reed, Adrian Sandoval,
Chloe Sam 601, Colleen Cuts, Timothy Espinoza, Gregory is my name, Veryuk, Jennifer DeVoe, Big Bird Titty, Eliza Crawfish, and Benneth Bennington III, Alexia Benanti, Nitch, or Nietzsche, whatever. If we ever pronounce one of your names wrong, just tell us.
Just yell at us on Patreon.
Big Booty Beatdown, Moises T, Sam Maloney, Two-Headed Boy, Jeremy Cadtoret, Ben Shapiro's boyfriend, Jonathan Cassis, Luke O'Shea, Daniel Jackson, The Word of Microsoft, Jennifer Signs, Aaron and his Gundams, Darth Father, and my mom. Thank you all so much for supporting the show on Patreon. We literally couldn't do it without you. I promise we're working on more content, okay?
Facts.
It's gonna be, you'll be the first to know about it.
For the next Patreon goal, send us some ideas because we're fresh out, low key.
Yeah, it's this semester. Honestly, both semesters.
I'm getting
pretty tough.
Fucking ran through right now, sucked and
really
fucked
bad.
right now, not in a good way.
It's a tough semester. So if you have any ideas for what we should be doing or what kind of content you'd like to see, even if you're not a patron, let us know.
Exactly. Because the goals, they kind of go for everybody. Like, they'll be like the Q&A, the $600 goal. The Q&A came out for everyone.
Everyone got to benefit from it.
Exactly. The patrons got it first. They get to benefit a little bit more from it naturally because they're putting in more, putting in work.
That's right.
Well, dollars.
Thank you all for listening this week. We'll see you next time.
Have a great one.